So today is Saturday, February 15th, 2020. Uh, Today marks the date of on the traditional Mahayana Buddhist calendar of the Buddha's entrance into Parinirvana. That is, bluntly put, his death. Nirvana literally means blown out, the way a candle's flame is blown out. Nirvana is the blowing out of the flames of greed, anger, and ignorance, when all, even the faintest, unconscious traces of habitual self-centeredness are gone, entirely gone. At death, such a fully enlightened one passes completely into nirvana, eternal, joyous, selfless, pure, as the Kanzeon expresses it. For such a realized Buddha, this is said to mark yet another step on the road of even greater fulfillment. How? We're talking about death, after all. Proceeding beyond, going further as pure wisdom, selfless compassion, and total knowledge is unimaginable. To follow such a step, even hypothetically, calls us to go beyond all possibilities of conceptual understanding. Prajna Paramita is totally gone beyond knowledge. The way of the Bodhisattva, the growing up being, is the way of endless right now practice. However, this practice moves beyond all self-willed efforts, entirely beyond. As Dogen says, traceless, or we might say, selfless practice continues endlessly. And this we can at least touch base with and personally confirm in moments of our own committed going beyond practice. Attention to this breath, this count, this koan point is complete attention. Blake says, one thought fills immensity. There is no longer room for two things in the mind, that is, me and everything else. There is just this. Non-duality is nirvana too. Dogen wrote in section 23 of the Shobogenzo I of the Treasury of the True Dharma, section titled Buddha Nature. Grass, trees, and forests are impermanent. They are Buddha nature. Human beings, things, body and mind are impermanent. They are Buddha nature. Land, mountains, and rivers are impermanent as they are Buddha nature. Unsurpassable, complete enlightenment is impermanent as it is Buddha nature. Great Parinirvana is Buddha nature as it is impermanence. Let's repeat that. Buddha nature from Shobogenzo. Grass, trees, and forests are impermanent. They are Buddha nature. Humans, things, body, and mind are impermanent. They are Buddha nature. Land, mountains, and rivers are impermanent, as they are Buddha nature. Unsurpassable, complete enlightenment is impermanent, as it is Buddha nature. Great Parinirvana is Buddha nature, as it is impermanence. With the Parinirvana, the Buddha shows Buddha nature. It is impermanence itself. And the Buddha said, what is the one thing that bodhisattvas guard? It is aspiration for enlightenment. Bodhisattvas, great beings, always endeavor to guard this aspiration for enlightenment, just as people in the world protect their only child. It is like a one-eyed person protecting the working eye, or people traveling in a vast wilderness protecting their guide. Bodhisattvas guard the aspiration for enlightenment in this way. Because bodhisattvas guard the aspiration for enlightenment, they attain unsurpassable, complete enlightenment. Because bodhisattvas attain unsurpassable, complete enlightenment. They embody constancy, enjoyment, freedom, and purity. This is unsurpassably great parinirvana. Thus bodhisattvas guard this one thing. Because bodhisattvas guard the aspiration for enlightenment, they attain unsurpassable, complete enlightenment. Because bodhisattvas attain unsurpassable, complete enlightenment, they embody consistency, enjoyment, freedom, and purity. This is unsurpassable great parinirvana. Thus bodhisattvas guard this one thing. So parinirvana is realization itself, even as it is the path to and of realization. Literally, it is the realization of crossing over to the other shore of enlightenment. Yet having crossed over, there is no other shore. We awake to this, as in, this is it. Some words by Master Hakuin from his brilliant commentary on the Prajna Paramita Hridaya Heart of Perfect Wisdom Sutra go, because all beings of past, present, and future depend upon the wisdom paramita they attain, the highest enlightenment. That's a quote from the Heart Sutra. Hakuin writes, "Stop hammering spikes into empty space. Steers may give birth to calves, but no Buddha was ever enlightened by relying on prajna wisdom. Why? Because wisdom and enlightenment are from the first, not to. Besides, if a Buddha has anything at all left to attain, he is no Buddha. This is like a blazing conflagration. If Buddhas and patriarchs get too close, they get burned to death, just like everyone else. Otters will be catching fish in trees long before Buddhas are enlightened by relying on something. And declaring a Buddha has something to attain, next, he'll blither about the arhat's marital bliss." So let's repeat that. This is Heart Sutra. Because all Buddhas of past, present, and future depend upon the wisdom paramita they attain, the highest enlightenment. Hakuin, "Stop hammering spikes into empty space. Steers may give birth to calves, but no Buddha was ever enlightened by relying on prajna wisdom. Why? Because wisdom and enlightenment are from the first, not to. Besides, if a Buddha has anything at all left to attain, he's no Buddha. This is like a blazing conflagration. If Buddhas and patriarchs get too close, they get burned to death, just like everyone else. Otters will be catching fish in trees long before Buddhas are enlightened by relying on anything. And declaring a Buddha has something to attain, next he'll blither about the arhat's marital bliss." Now, nothing to attain doesn't mean nothing left to attain. From the very beginning, as Hakuin says, all beings are Buddha. What then is there to attain? Arhats, of course, are celibate. They are not repressed or avoiding or working with sexuality in a celibate manner. Rather, they are said to be beyond even enough thoughts of separation to even conceive of something like sexuality. There's no separation at all, and so no non-separation. As to the great burning, in which all are consumed, we have this in our koan curriculum. Hekigan Roku, case 29, Dasui, it goes along with everything else. A monk asked Daisui, when the conflagration at the end of the kalpa sweeps through, and the great cosmos is destroyed, I wonder, is this one destroyed or not? Daisui said, It will be destroyed. The monk said, will it be gone with everything else? Dai Sui said, it will be gone with everything else. This can be taken as a Zen Buddhist version of tough love. It can also be seen as a great and tender gift of liberation and relief. The verse each night of Sesshin reminds us, I beg to urge you, everyone, life and death is a great matter. All things pass quickly away. Each of you must be completely alert, never neglectful, never indulgent. I beg to urge you, everyone. Life and death is a great matter. All things pass quickly away. Each of us must be completely alert, never neglectful, never indulgent. Now, here's an account based on traditional sources of the Parinirvana of the historic Buddha Shakyamuni, the Buddha of our world cycle, that is, of our historical period of time on this earth. And I'll be reading from The Hungry Tigress, the completely revised and expanded edition, Buddhist Myths, Legends, and Jataka Tales, as told by Rafe Martin, myself, forward by Roshi Philip Kaplow. And this is the 1998 edition published by Yellow Moon Press, which is quite different from the earlier editions. There was a Shambhala edition, which was quite different, and then there was a Parallax Press edition, which was revised and expanded, but the editing was quite poor on it, and mistakes were made by the editor, actually. And then it was revised again in '98, and that was the final version. And that's the one I'll be reading from. So, in his 80th year, the Buddha became ill. He admitted to Ananda, that is his cousin and attendant, very loyal, intellectual, brilliant, and tender-hearted person, Ananda, that the time of his departure was near. He said his body was like a worn-out cart that could only be kept going with difficulty. Only in deep meditation, he added, when all sense of the body had fallen away, was he at ease. The Buddha then addressed the monks, saying, all component things grow old. Work out your continued liberation with diligence. Time waits for no one. In 3 months the Tathagata, who is thus come, he who is thus come, will enter nirvana. Then the Buddha, accompanied by many monks and with Ananda by his side, walked to Pava, stopping at the mango grove of the smith Kunda. The smith received instruction from the great teacher, then, with heart gladdened, fed the assembly a lavish vegetarian meal. Well, we don't know if it was vegetarian, actually. There are various interpretations of the precept. The older interpretation, or one of them, says that don't have meat, animals killed for us, but if it's offered to us, then even ordained people would eat it. Non-discrimination whatsoever. However, there are other interpretations, especially in ancient China, that tended to see upholding the precept as being completely vegetarian. In any case, during that meal, the Buddha ate some mushrooms, though some accounts say pork. And immediately upon eating that dish, he told Ananda to set it aside and let no one else eat of it, for the food in that dish was spoiled. Shortly after this, he was struck with such pain that he could hardly stand. When the pain abated, he and Ananda set off for Kushanara. The Buddha was weak, and they walked slowly, taking their time to complete the journey, resting by the river banks and beneath the trees as they went. During that journey, the Buddha counseled Ananda that no one was to blame Kunda the smith, nor was the smith himself to feel any blame. 2 meals, he said, are supremely precious to all Buddhas. One is received just before the one who has thus come attains perfect enlightenment. If you remember, that was the bowl of milk rice he was given after terrible ascetic practices of starvation, eating down to just 1 sesame seed a day. And then the second is the one received just prior to the Buddha's full entrance into nirvana. That was the meal that he had at Kunda the smith's. Therefore, he added, everyone should know that with this final meal, Kunda the smith has established a very good karma, beneficial to himself and to others, and there is no reason for him to grieve. At last they arrived at the Sala tree grove of the Mallas at Kushanara on the far shore of the Hinaravati River. It was almost 3 months then to the day from the time of the Buddha's pronouncement of his going forth into nirvana. Then the Buddha turned to Ananda and said, Ananda, please set up a couch for me between the twin Sala trees, with my head lying to the north. I must lie down now. I can go no further. Weeping, Ananda did as the Buddha requested, spreading and folding a cloth over the great stone couch that lay beneath the trees. The Buddha then reclined on his right side upon this couch and, ever mindful, alert, and self-possessed, rested beneath the trees. Though it was out of season, the twin Sala trees flowered, and blossoms rained down from the branches and from the sky. Unearthly music sounded. Ananda was astonished by these miracles, but the Buddha said, it is not thus that the world-honored one is truly reverenced. Those who do good, who uphold the practices and precepts of good character, who fulfill their duties in life, both great and small, those who gain an entry into the Dharma and discover that they and all beings are intrinsically Buddhas, it is such as these who, whether monks or nuns, lay men or women, of this faith or any other faith, truly reverence the Tathagata. Now know, Ananda, this very night the Tathagata will enter nirvana. There will be no more limited return in store for me. No further error, no further suffering. The birds grew very quiet and uttered no sound, sitting along the branches as if in a trance, their bodies relaxed. Ordained practitioners, advanced disciples, and beginners, their face covered with tears, gathered in the grove as the light of the afternoon deepened and gathered. Go, Ananda, said the Buddha, and tell the Mallas that it is time. He was in the Mallas' territory then. They will be stricken with grief if they are not permitted to attend me now before my nirvana. Ananda obeyed the order. The Mallas, their eyes streaming tears, came at once, and Ananda presented them to the reclining Buddha, family by family. Then, anguish in their minds, they stood weeping among the trees of their Sala grove. A lone truth seeker named Subhadda, troubled with doubts, arrived hoping to see the Buddha while time remained. But Ananda refused him an interview, saying, the Exalted One is growing weaker, friend. The hour is late. Do not trouble him now. But the Buddha, overhearing, asked that the wanderer Subhadda be admitted to him. Subhadda questioned the Buddha, and with the Buddha's replies, his doubts were resolved. He was admitted into the Sangha, the last disciple, to be personally accepted by the Buddha. And this was done by the Buddha on his deathbed. There are koans like this of a teacher on his or her deathbed, trying one last time to help a student gain realization. Some of these stories, it's successful. In others, it's not at all. But the teacher's job is, even on the deathbed, to try. That's the job in this world, to keep trying, to keep at it while breath remains. Then The world-honored one, seeing the Mallas still caught in the nets of distress, spoke as follows. In this hour of joy, it is not proper for you to grieve. Your despair is quite inappropriate, and you should regain your composure. The goal, so hard to win, which for so many eons I have worked hard for, is now at hand. When that is won, there is no earth, water, fire, wind, or air present, but unchanging bliss beyond all objects of the senses, and a peace which nothing can ever take away. When you hear of that, and know that no becoming mars it, and that nothing there can ever pass away, because it's all passed away, how then can there still be any room in your minds for grief? At Bodh Gaya, when I won enlightenment, I got rid of the causes of becoming, which are really nothing but a gang of harmful vipers. Now the hour nears when I will also get rid of this body, the crystallization of my own thoughts and deeds, rising from an endless past. Now that at last the frightful dangers of becoming are about to become extinct, now that they are about to be blown out like a candle's flame is blown out by the wind, now that at last I emerge from the vast and endless suffering, is this really a time that you should grieve? So spoke the sage of the Shakyas, the Buddha Shakyamuni. The oldest of the Mallas alone found strength to reply. We all weep, but why? We should look upon the awakened one as a man who has escaped from the dangers of a house on fire. The gods see it like that. So should we too. Yet the cause of our grief remains. This mighty man, the Tathagata, once he has won nirvana completely, will pass beyond our knowledge and our sight. When those who travel in the wilderness lose their guide, they fall into distress. That is how we feel. People who walk away from a gold mine with no riches are to be pitied. Likewise, those who have seen the great teacher ought to have gained some spiritual achievement of their own. World-honored one, this is why we weep. The old man spoke to the point. Then the Buddha, the best of men, aiming at their welfare, addressed them one final time. Liberation cannot come from the mere sight of me. It demands serious efforts in actual practice. But if someone has truly seen my Dharma, then that person is released from the net of suffering, even though they have never seen me at all. Similarly, the mere sight of a physician cures no illness. One must actually take the medicine to be well. The mere sight of me enables no one to conquer suffering. Each person has to meditate and discover the truth themselves. If disciplined, a man or woman may live as far away from me as can be. If he or she only sees my Dharma, then that person truly sees me as well. But if a person should neglect to strive in concentrated calm for higher things, then, though they may live quite near to me, it will be as if they are far away. So work hard for truth's sake, do good deeds, strive resolutely for full enlightenment. Be vigilant. Remember, life is continually shaken by many kinds of difficulties and sufferings, even as the flame of a lamp is shaken by the wind. In this way, the sage, the best of all who live, encouraged and fortified the Mallas, but as they went back to Kushanara, each one felt helpless and alone, as if crossing a swollen river on a dark and stormy night. Then the Buddha turned to his close disciples and said, everything comes to an end, though it may last an eon. I have done all I could do, both for myself and for others. I have disciplined in heaven and earth all those I could discipline. I have trained them and motivated them and set them in the stream that leads to full liberation. Hereafter my Dharma shall abide for generations among living beings. Recognize the true nature of the living world and do not be anxious. Separation cannot be avoided. All that lives is subject to this law, yet strive from this day onwards that it shall be no more. When the light of wisdom has dispelled the darkness of ignorance, when all existence has been seen as without abiding substance, peace ensues when life draws to an end, a peace which seems to cure a long sickness at last. Everything, whether stationary or movable, is bound to perish in the end. Be mindful and vigilant. The time for my entry into nirvana has arrived. These are my last words. As the Buddha entered nirvana, the earth quivered and firebrands fell from the sky. Rivers boiled, the heavens were lit with fire, thunderbolts crashed, winds raged, the moon's light waned, and in spite of a cloudless sky, darkness spread everywhere. Beautiful flowers opened out of season on the solid trees above the Buddha's couch, and the trees bent down over him and showered his golden body with flowers. The mighty five-headed Nagas, the great serpents, stood motionless in the sky, their eyes red with grief, their hoods closed, as with deep devotion they gazed on the body of the sage. The gods of the pure abode remained composed deep in their non-attachment to the things of this world. The kings of the Gandharvas and Nagas, as well as the Yakshas and Devas who rejoice in the Dharma, all appeared in the sky mourning and absorbed in the utmost grief. The world, when the great sage had passed beyond, became like a mountain whose peak had been shattered by a thunderbolt. It became like the sky without the moon, like a pond whose lotuses the frost has withered. Only those who truly understood the deep import of the Buddha's teachings were not shaken to their depths, for like the Buddha himself, they knew well that it is the nature of all things to pass away. And I will look at the notes for this. Let's see. So the note goes, after 45 years of teaching, the Buddha entered nirvana. The moment is revealed as a powerful and fitting culmination of an active and generous life. Usually we see the Buddha lying on his right side on a stone couch between twin solid trees. If you look at the little Tonka reproduction that's up on the altar today, you'll see that. He's lying on his right side, surrounded by gods, nagas, devas, yakshas, animals, people, disciples, all kinds of beings. He is teaching until the end, considerate of the needs of those around him, confident in the reality of his teaching, surrounded by monks and nuns, lay people, nagas, devas, animals, spiritually very strong, yet simultaneously old and physically very weak. Many carvings and painted scrolls depict this moment in all its beauty and intensity. 17 centuries after this event, the Buddhist monk poet Saigo, Japanese poet, viewing blossoms, wrote this verse. I saw in Yoshino's billows of blossoms that long ago time of great passing when the solid trees surrounding him suddenly turned as white as cranes. So though almost 2,000 years had passed, Saigo looks at, that's William Lafleur's translation. It's in the book Mirror for the Moon, which are the verses, Saigo's poetry, one of the great poets, very inspirational to Basho. Saigo looks at blossoms and sees the Parinirvana right now. He sees blossoms opening, billows of blossoms. And he sees the blossoms opening on the solid trees above the Buddha. The moment of the Buddha's parinirvana is unrivaled, except for the enlightenment itself, in the depth of feeling it evokes, the impression it has made on the Buddhist imagination. So those are the two big events, the Buddha touching the earth with enlightenment and the Buddha passing away, demonstrating with his own body and mind the complete reality of impermanence as nirvana. Doesn't mean that impermanence is joyous in itself. Lots of difficulties dealing with impermanence. But one of the great gifts of Zen is to help us learn to be impermanence. All the changes in our lives are impermanence. This is our own nature. demonstrating its reality. The two events, enlightenment and the Parinirvana, complement each other. With enlightenment, the Buddha, I have here breaks through, but I go, now, I wouldn't say it like this now. When the self, we might say, falls completely away, it says here that with enlightenment, the Buddha breaks through to permanence. But everything falls away, even permanence. So that, I feel, is inaccurate. This book was written, let's see, more than 20 years ago, so I forgive myself. And it says, and what is eternal and abiding is brought dramatically to the fore. Yes, that's true, eternal, joyous, selfless, pure. But that doesn't mean different than impermanence. At the time of his Parinirvana, the passing of all things, the impermanence of all created forms is given preeminence and becomes in effect his final eloquent teaching. The enlightenment and the Parinirvana, permanence and impermanence taken together, reveal the essence of the Buddha's life as teaching. In Foundations of Tibetan Mysticism, Lama Govinda, speaking about the Buddha's life and teaching, writes, those who keep aloof from the contacts of life miss the opportunities of sacrifice, of self-negation, of relinquishing hard-earned gains, of giving up what was dear or what seemed desirable, of service to others, and of the trials of strength in the temptations and ordeals of life. Again, to help others and to help oneself go hand in hand. The one cannot be without the other. However, we should not force our good deeds upon others from a sense of moral superiority, but act spontaneously from that natural kind of selflessness which flows from the knowledge of the solidarity of all life and from the indescribable experience of oneness gained in meditation, an experience whose universal character was expressed in the general religious attitude of the Mahayana. It was this knowledge of solidarity, which, however imperfect in its first dawning, led the Buddha to in his formal existences upon the path of enlightenment, and which made him renounce his own immediate liberation when meeting the Buddha of a previous world age. In our recent session, we spoke about that, the meeting of the what was it? Sumedha, yeah. The Buddha as the hermit sage, Sumedha, and the Buddha Dipankara of that past world age, and how that set him on his path. So it led the Buddha in his former existences upon the path of enlightenment, and which made him renounce his own immediate liberation when meeting the Buddha of a previous world age, in order to gain perfect Buddhahood through the experiences and sufferings of countless rebirths in the practice of the Bodhisattva virtues, which would enable him to reach the highest aim, not only for himself, but for the benefit of innumerable other beings as well. It was this knowledge which made the Buddha return from the tree of enlightenment in order to proclaim his gospel of light, according to which the faculty of enlightenment, that is bodhicitta, is inherent in every living being. Whenever this faculty becomes a conscious force in any being, a bodhisattva is born. To awaken this consciousness was the life's task of the Buddha. It was this that caused him to take upon himself the hardships of a wandering life for 40 long years, instead of enjoying for himself the happiness of liberation. The appellation Tathagata, literally he who is thus come, is a traditional title of the Buddha. It implies a condition of total presence in which time and space, past and future, have been thoroughly transcended. Nirvana literally means extinguished or blown out, or according to some sources, cooled down, implying that all causes leading to limited existence, that is greed, anger, and ignorance, have, like a candle's flame, been completely extinguished. It may also suggest the complete stilling, hence blowing out of breath, which is said to occur in deep meditation. A full Buddha, Buddhist tradition holds, being freed not just from all limited existence, but from even the subtle causes leading to limited, which means self-centered existence, does not die, but enters fully into nirvana. Nirvana, of course, is present right now. This earth where we stand is the pure lotus land in this very body, the body of Buddha. The death of such a one is a parinirvana, an entrance into nirvana. This version of the Buddha's parinirvana is drawn from Ananda Kumaraswami's Buddha and the Gospel of Buddhism, as well as from Ashwaghosa's classic Buddha Karita, as it appears in Kanze's Buddhist scriptures. The parinirvana moments themselves are mostly quoted with some adaptation and editing from the version in Edward Kanze's Buddhist scriptures. When the Teisho is over, we'll recite our great vows. No, we will, regardless. We'll have kinhin, and then we will set up for our ceremony of the Buddha's parinirvana, in which we have a chance each individually to honor the Buddha by making a powdered incense offering. We can stop for a moment and look at the Tanka reproduction, which is, do you remember what temple in Kyoto or Nara that was from, Rose?
For some reason I'm remembering Horyuji, but I might be wrong.
Yeah, I don't think that's so, but I don't know. I don't remember. It was famous for a particular reason, which is that in the painting, there's a cat among the animals. For some reason, cats were seen as too independent to have come and bowed before the Buddha at the parinirvana. However, this was a big to-do, that it is very famous, a very huge Tanka scroll. This is a very, very small reproduction. The artist painted a cat, and it was a beautiful gesture. If you want to read about that, not about that Tanka, but about the issue with the cat, there's a beautiful children's book that Roshi Kapleau loved. We always shared with our kids, but it's a worthy read for adults as well, called The Cat Who Went to Heaven by Elizabeth Coatsworth, which won the Newbery Award, I think, in 1929. So, and that's a very Buddhist story set in Japan about an artist who decides, because of his own cat, when he paints the parinirvana, to include a cat in the painting. If you've never read it, I recommend it. It's a slender but quite beautiful story.